Well, Arsenal are still in the market, supposedly, but the winger target is the one on the menu for the club. Is that Ebere Eze or is that someone else? We're going to talk through the options in today's Arsenal Transfer Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much as always for tuning in. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you've had a really good start to your week. It's Wednesday. We've made it through Tuesday. Tuesday, of course, is very much the worst day of the week, as we have discussed and proven on many occasions. I mean, what happened yesterday? It's Tuesday. Spurs being linked to Eze, Man City going for Rodrigo. It's clearly the worst day of the week. So thank goodness it's Wednesday. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much for tuning in as per. Please do drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. We, of course, try and reach 1,000 likes on every single episodes, and then I usually forget to check whether we've done so on the last episode, and then I end up doing it live on the show. But we did yesterday, so thank you so much to all of you. Please do drop a like, subscribe, all the usual YouTube-y stuff. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box. Rowan, Matt G, we've got Knowledge and Runs with Cows. We've got Andy and A Miracle. We've got David and Otti and Claire. Good morning to Oslo Gooner and Running on Empty. Forgot the P in your name there. Good morning to Morgie in the chat box today. Good to see. Colin, Steve, other Steve Wells. We've got Kirill. We've got Coach. We've got Panrasta joining us. I've not seen your name in a while. Welcome back. Andy, we've got Alloway, we've got Darbas, we've got Paul, we've got plenty more of you guys and girls in the chat box as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for standing by. And I hope your week's been treating you very well indeed. So, yes, let's jump into today's slides. Be very clear and honest with you. Like yesterday's stories kind of mainly revolved around this man, Ebere Eze. We've talked about him at length every single day pretty much for the last month. And certainly when looking at this idea of moving players on, that is still the focus. And Spurs have kind of, with the injury to James Maddison, been encouraged to explore this potential deal. And after Fabrizio Romano reported the story yesterday, of course, what followed was a lot of journalists followed this story. A lot of outlets followed this story. Nothing necessarily from The Athletic so far. Even in their kind of deal sheet piece yesterday, it didn't include anything on Eze, to the best of my reading skills anyway. But Ed Aarons of The Guardian, of course, very good links into Crystal Palace, also reporting this story. But a lot of the stories that came out still reiterated Arsenal's interests. And as we've talked about, Arsenal are still interested. That interest hasn't gone. It's not disappeared. It's not gone anywhere. And also the fact that Ebere Eze, of course, would prefer a move to Arsenal over Tottenham is also a key aspect of this as well. But on top of everything else, the reality is for now is that Arsenal need to sell players. Players need to be moved on. Arsenal are focusing on that. And the question mark is Spurs, if they are going to have a breakthrough in the chase for Eze, if they manage to find an agreement with Palace, if they manage to find an agreement with the player, will that spark or force Arsenal's hand? That's the big question that we've got right now. Will it or won't it? Well, the ultimate answer to that is we will see. We don't necessarily know as of yet. But what was interesting, I think, about the Athletics piece yesterday was what James McNicholas reported, is that Arsenal are currently kind of assessing options of left wingers. Now, Eze can play as a wide left player, but predominantly, as we know, is more of a attacking central midfielder. And therefore, it could be that Arsenal are looking at other options for those wide left areas. So what I thought we'd do, because yesterday wasn't exactly smashing us in the face with news of a variety, I thought what we would do is do something a little bit classic TGT, if you like, and go through some of the analytics surrounding some of the potential left-wing targets that Arsenal could therefore look to sign. So we're going to go through as many, I think, as 8 or so. I think we've got 7 or 8 players to talk about in today's show. I will be up front with you. Rodrigo is not one of these players. I just I just can't really find the reason that Rodrigo would happen now with Manchester City kind of there, €100 million price tag. The Rodrigo thing for me, I just don't see as any kind of realistic at all. There are some on this you might also suggest are kind of similarly unrealistic, but we're going to look at them because they've not necessarily been talked about. So let's have a look, shall we, at some of these players. So we're going to go from kind of a younger age bracket to the more kind of older age bracket of players. And we're going to run through their FBref profiles and get a bit of an insight into who they are, what they are, and what they could bring to Arsenal. And we begin with Lyon's Malick Fofana, 20 years of age, of course. Exciting player, Malick Fofana, and has actually seen some loose links to a number of Premier League clubs during this season. But in the last year, Malick Fofana recorded 0.47 non-penalty goals per 90. So a really good return on goals. We're going to be looking at kind of per 90 stats because looking at raw goal data often can be skewed based upon how many games a player has played compared to others. But in terms of all of his goals in the Big Five, obviously this is compared to the Big Five leagues, he actually ranks in the 90th percentile of players. I mean, there's only 10% of players with a better non-penalty goal scoring rate. In terms of assists, though, doesn't rank necessarily as highly in the 0.21 assists per 90, 61st percentile. But he is a very good player on the ball in terms of carrying the ball. He's in the 98th percentile. Only the likes of Noni Madueke are higher when it comes to progressive carries, 6.72 per 90. But in terms of when he gets on the ball and takes players on, that's where his game definitely needs some improvement because he's only successfully completing a take on 1.41 per 90 in the 41st percentile of players. So Lyon's youngster, he'd be quite expensive, I think, from the sounds of things as well. And he's been linked with a number of players, including Liverpool and Chelsea as well. But Malick Fofana is potentially one of the left wingers on the market this summer. Another Liga youngster is Monaco's Elise Ben Seghir, French-Moroccan player. Another youngster has actually played against Arsenal. You might remember him from playing against Arsenal in the Emirates Cup in 2024. He's another one of these kind of young, exciting talents coming out of France. Not as prolific as Malick Fofana, only in the 45th percentile, scoring once every 4 games so far while playing on that left-hand side. And he can play more so kind of as a central player as well. He's played on the left. He's played in a number of other positions as well. But he has begun to really kind of take his game to another level. And I think you're going to start seeing him and his name kind of spoken a little bit more frequently amongst kind of those that like to get on the hype surrounding kind of young players on Europe. And what he's doing currently right now for Monaco is, he's earned professional contract. He's earned kind of more kind of senior level contracts as well. And he's started to get a lot more opportunities playing at the senior level. He's been playing in the Champions League with Monaco as well. He's got that experience. And last season, he did predominantly play on the left-hand side. He played 25 times on the left-hand side, played 6 times in the middle, and then once playing as a centre forward. So he really is developing into a more wide player than he is playing through the middle. But I can see a lot of you saying in the chat box saying he's more of a central player. But last season, he played 4 times as many games on the left as he did in the middle of the field. So one to check out there. Kenan Yildiz, our third 20-year-old on this list, obviously an exciting youngster and Turkish international player. Obviously a player that I think a lot of you have mentioned in the chat box before, previously with Bayern, then made the move to Juve and into their senior squad as well. He's a very versatile player that can play in a number of positions. Played the majority of his games last season on the left, 25 matches played 52 games all season, but 25 of those were on the left-hand side. Can play centrally, can even play on the right-hand side as well. And he is what you would describe as ambidextrous, where he can use both of his feet. Very good with both feet. And a very talented player indeed. When it comes to non-penalty goals, similar to Ben Seghir, 0.23, so goals per 90. So you're looking at kind of a goal every 4 matches. Assist-wise, slightly less, 0.15, playing, of course, for a pretty poor. Let's be honest, Juve aren't exactly that great of a side these days and have really taken a bit of a hit recently. But in terms of taking players on, he is a lot more successful. 86th percentile for this, 2.38 successful take-ons per 90. In terms of progressive carries, slightly less, 4.2 per 90, 67 percentile there. And he has got some, decent defensive work rates. 90th percentile for tackles per 90, 1.97 tackles per game. Definitely impressive, but would be very expensive, very difficult to get him out of the Serie A club. Arguably more difficult and probably the most expensive on this list, but a player who has been linked with an exit from his club is my choice if I was picking dream players. Of course, I don't think are necessarily realistic, and that is Bradley Barcola, of course, of PSG. Had an absolutely brilliant campaign in the previous season. 14 goals, 11 assists in 34 Liga matches, 21 goals and 21 assists across all competitions, mainly playing on the left-hand side, but can play on the right if indeed he is asked to. He is right-footed, so he's an inverted left-sided player, but I just don't see any real chance of this happening. With Kvaratskhelia, of course, joining PSG, it has limited Barcola's minutes quite considerably, with Desiree Doué and Ousmane Dembele, of course, there as well. And there's links with PSG looking at another potential forward player being signed before the end of this summer transfer window. They've got Malulu as well, another young, exciting player coming through. But 89th percentile for non-penalty goals, 99th percentile for non-penalty XG, 80th percentile for shots, 92nd percentile for assists, 99th percentile for touching the attacking penalty area, and 99th percentile for progressive passes received, as well as 91st percentile for progressive carries. He's got defensive work rate, 94th percentile for interceptions and 85th for blocks as well. He is, for me, the player that, without a doubt, if I could pick anybody, I would go for. But it's just a dream scenario, and I cannot see this one happening. Moving into another unlikely, but still one with potential, and that's Anthony Gordon of Newcastle United. He doesn't necessarily, though, highlight as too impressive when it comes to the stats. As you can see from that FB Ref profile page there, only one of any of these stats, being the progressive carries, ranks into the greens. And I think it's one of those where you look at kind of the profile of a player having watched Anthony Gordon and think, sometimes stats probably aren't everything they're cracked up to be. And that's coming from me, an absolute stat head who really does love them. But he's taken a step up with Newcastle. Obviously, a lot of the emphasis is on Alexander Isak there. And he is a player that continually finds himself linked to some of the biggest clubs in the world, including the likes of Liverpool. But stat-wise, he really doesn't show up that impressively at all. Is it because of Newcastle? Is it because of him? Well, that's, I guess, a question for us to decide and be subjective about. But of course, 0.18 non-penalty goals per 90. In terms of assists, 0.18 assists per 90. Progressive carries in the 73rd percentile. That's his most impressive kind of percentile stat across the board. Doesn't necessarily have the same defensive work rate as some of the others we've been talking to. Is he that much of a step up on Martinelli? Is he worth the money that it would cost to get him? Probably not, is the answer, based on the probably not side of things regarding the money. Is he better than Martinelli? I think he's better than Martinelli, but I'm just not sure whether or not he'd be worth the money to get him. The next two does show up quite impressively stats-wise, but there are obviously some important statistics to point out here is on Rafael Leao. You know my thoughts on Rafael Leao. You know my issues with his inconsistencies. You know my issues with him blowing hot and cold. But there are some impressive parts to Rafael Leao's game that are definitely worth talking about. In particular, his chaotic dribbling, his strength, his power on the ball, his speed, all of these statistics are something that obviously get people off their seats. And we see that with his successful take-ons in the 95th percentile. We see that with his progressive carries in the 79th percentile, his touch and attacking penalty area at the 85th, and progressive passes received in the 85th as well. In terms of his goals, it's not prolific. It's 0.32. He's getting a goal every 3 games, so he's not in the elite level in terms of goal scoring right now. He's in the 69th percentile there. In terms of his assists, 0.26 per 90, so assisted once every 4 games, playing for an AC Milan side who have had their struggles, to be fair to them as well. And I know he's a player that a lot of people like. I'm just not necessarily one who's sold on him when I've watched plenty of him, and defensively is the big kind of caveat here, that he doesn't have the defensive work rate that I think would see Arsenal necessarily be overly keen. They wouldn't make him a priority. It could be a player, of course, that's seen as a market opportunity that Arteta thinks he can change, but the 5th percentile for tackles, the 18th for interceptions, the 19th for blocks, and the 7th for clearances doesn't have that defensive work rate in the same way that others, as we know, do. Some wildcards here, actually, and we're getting into kind of the older bracket of players. And a player that I have liked for a long time, and that is Pedro Goncalves, of course, of Sporting. Now, Arsenal have already had their episodes of working with Sporting this summer and trying to get a deal done for Victor Gyökeres, but he is a teammate, of course, of Victor Gyökeres, a player that has, of course, been linked with a move to Arsenal in the past. Pedro Goncalves years ago. He's the player, of course, that knocked Arsenal out of the Europa League, you might remember, with a goal from the halfway line. It took Arsenal to a penalty shootout that they would go on to lose. But yes, Pedro Goncalves is a player who continues to impress. He's already got his scoring rate off to a kickstart this season, of course, scoring for Sporting already. But he is a player that, as we know, is still playing in the Portuguese league, has played pretty much the predominance of his career in the Portuguese league, but his attacking numbers are very, very impressive. He's 76th percentile for non-penalty goals, 0.3 per 90, 95th percentile for non-penalty XG. These, of course, are not in Europe's top 5 leagues, though it is worth pointing that fact out. But he ranks amongst those leagues outside of the top 5 exceptionally highly. He's a good attacker. He's a good, of course, passer at the ball as well. But not only that, but he loves to get into the box. So if we want more threat in the box, he is the type of player. He's very versatile. And he's got some of those inklings that defensively he can work. 36th percentile for tackles, 43rd percentile for interceptions. Issue is he's not one of those rapid winger types. That's just not the type of player he is. He's a little bit of the Trossard style more so than the Martinelli style of player. And I know that people may prefer more so kind of the pace and power of a traditional winger type than him. But he is a player who has been linked with a move away from Sporting in the past, and a player that I just wanted to include on this list. And lastly is Kaoru Mitoma, of course, a player who I regularly spell incorrectly, his first name in particular. A lot of vowels in Mitoma's first name that I often get the order wrong for. But Kaoru Mitoma is somebody I can tell you with information Arsenal have an interest in. He has been a player that Arsenal have monitored and followed for a little while. It's not to say that that interest has been formalised or anything beyond just monitoring the player and being interested in the player, but he is a player that Arsenal have held an interest. You heard that as well from Ed Aarons when he came on the show covering Arsenal for The Guardian. And his statistics are always rather impressive. 73rd percentile for goals per non-penalty goals per 90 in the Premier League. He's scoring better than a rate of 1 in 3. Obviously, assist-wise, that is a little bit of a less impressive factor. Here, only 0.14 assists per 90, 32nd percentile there. But a really impressive player from a dribbling standpoint on the ball. Can take players on. He's got a diploma in dribbling, as you've probably heard the story over and over again. And defensively, he works extremely hard. Extremely hard. He works up and down that line. And I do think he's one of those players that, had he have moved a couple of years ago to one of Europe's elite clubs, I think you would have seen his profile absolutely explode. I really do think that he's probably stayed at Brighton a little bit too long. That's kind of where I'm at with him. I just think he stayed a little bit too long at Brighton, and that ultimately has, I think that's curtailed his chances somewhat of getting that dream move somewhere else. I'd be surprised if he ended up moving away from Brighton in the near future, but he is somebody that Arsenal have in the past held an interest in. And that's all of our profiles. I guess something I missed, and I'm just adding into the slideshow now for your benefit, is, of course, the profile of our current winger, which is, of course, Gabriel Martinelli. Now, when you look at Martinelli's statistics and you make comparisons between them, of course, and the likes of Rafael Leao, for example, he currently has slightly less goals per 90. We're talking about 0.32 for Leao, and we look at Martinelli's statistics right now, it's 0.28, 57th percentile. And across the board, he's kind of hot and cold, isn't he, there? I mean, he has the defensive side of things. There's no doubt about that. He's definitely providing Arsenal cover in that area of the pitch. 21st percentile for tackles, 56th for clearances, 67th for aerial duels won. And he does get in the box. There's no doubt about the fact that he gets in the box. 90th percentile, 6.48 touches in the penalty area. But he's just not efficient. he's just not been efficient for Arsenal. Those attacking statistics, the finishes, the shots, they're just not accurate enough. And that's why there is this emphasis on trying to get Arsenal into a position where we've got a winger that is efficient on the left as much as we are on the right. And Bukayo Saka, it's probably worth taking a look at some of his stats if I just get them up onto a slide for you. They are just absolutely night and day when they come to looking at kind of the volume of difference between the two. It's taking me a little bit just to get this slide made on the fly, but I'm doing it as quick as I can while speaking. I think that's if you've not liked the video already. It'd be great if you could. But Saka statistics, I won't throw up a picture of Saka. You know what he looks like. But just to give you kind of Bukayo Saka's statistics here, throwing them onto the slide now, and then we'll get a look at what they look like. Come on, paste, please. Thank you. Slideshow. There we go. And slides. So, yeah, I mean, this is... I didn't include Ademola Lookman. You're right. Yes, I didn't use Lookman stats. Correct. I'm not going to now. It's just too late. But you can look at here the difference between kind of Martinelli and Saka. They are absolutely night and day. You can look at these yourself, by the way. Just type in a player's name and type FBref, and you can get up their FBref profile. It's a free website. You can look at their statistics. But yeah, it's just the difference between the two. Look at the Greens in that attacking third, 77th percentile for non-penalty goals, 96th percentile for assists per 90. These are the levels that we need to be aiming for, of course, when it comes to Gabriel Martinelli. That's what we want to see on the left-hand side. That's the efficiency. But Saka is a special player. Saka is a world-class player. Saka is a player that's in the top 5 wingers in the world, So the likelihood of being able to replicate these statistics on the left are very, very, very difficult. Very difficult. So that's where I'm at. Joe says, Tom, do Madueke. You could all do these yourself. All you need to do is go onto your Safari, type in Madueke FBref, and you can get up these stats. I can tell you that, he ranks well for shots, he ranks well for dribbles, he ranks well for non-penalty goals, but it is the passing side of his game that's just a little bit low, and it's the assist side of his game that's a little bit low. But I think playing for Arsenal, you're going to see an improvement there. I also think defensively he's got good stats as well. He ranks, kind of in the 30s to the 50s in terms of his percentiles for the tackling and the defensive side of things. So yeah, it's those. But that's what we've got. They're the players that are, of course, potential options for Arsenal between now and the end of this window. Will they move for one of them, or will they move for Ebere Eze? We're going to get your thoughts on today's show and plenty more on your questions in part 2 right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of today's show. I'm literally just typing the word Lookman and FBref into my Google profile because he does impress, Lookman. 98 percentile for goals, 0.63 per 90. That's the highest that we've ever talked about on the show so far. Progressive carries, 94th percentile. Touching the attacking penalty area, 98. Progressive passes, 95th. I'll be honest with you, if I could choose a winger, and it's ironic that I didn't include him looking on it, but Ademola Lookman would rank quite highly. The issue, of course, with Lookman is that... his age profile, 27. Certainly, we talked about the idea if you sign Eze, I wouldn't be looking at Lookman. But if we're not signing Eze, it wouldn't necessarily be all that bad to look at a player like Lookman. I guess the issue with Lookman is that you've already had an opportunity to see him play in the Premier League at a younger age, and it's not necessarily worked out as well. He's developed a lot since then. And I think it's unfair to kind of look at him as a player that he was then and not take into account what he's done since then. So let's wait and see what happens. Let's go into the chat, shall we, and tackle some of these questions. Carl says, is Martinelli failing in certain areas due to how we play? Is it Arteta's coaching, or is it the simple fact that he's reached his ceiling? We've talked about the issues on our left-hand side. I think there is a systematic issue that is definitely there. I think it's a personnel problem as well. I think that we maybe saw a little bit of our way of fixing that actually against Athletic Club, the way in which we kind of structured the midfield with Zubimendi and Rice, and we moved to kind of a pivot formation a number of times. I said, and I've written that I want to see a 4-2-3-1, giving Odegaard more freedom and giving him abilities to have an influence on the left. And I think we saw that. So I think that system change slightly, this evolution of Arsenal's midfield for this season, hopefully will have a very positive effect. Calafiori as well, if he managed to stay fit, could also be quite a significant, impactful player for us on the left. But Martinelli gets into these kind of positions and just makes the wrong choice over and over and over again. And that's the frustration, is that we've not seen tangible progress and development from Martinelli over the last 2 seasons. He hasn't matched what he produced in 22-23, and in 23-24, and in 24-25, he just didn't reach those levels. In a season where we had record-breaking goal-scoring numbers in 23-24, record-breaking win numbers in 23-24, he still wasn't able. It was Trossard who was the more impressive player. He got 17 goals across all competitions, Trossard, in that 23-24 season. And for me, has become our best left wing option of the current players that we have, and yet looks like the most likely player to depart. Madueke is an option for us. He is an option for us on that left-hand side, and he is showing that in the little that we have seen of him. So we're going to see what he can provide, but there could still be a signing made by Arsenal between now and the end of the window. And by the way, I know that I say a lot about Rafael Leao in particular, a player that I've got my issues with. It's not for me saying that I'd categorically think he would be a failure. I just have my concerns that he has a lot of traits that are quite similar to Martinelli in the sense of his decision-making and his execution. Those two elements of his game at 26 years of age still haven't yet been refined. Could they be refined at Arsenal? Maybe, but we're putting a lot of emphasis on Arsenal doing the work with that player. So that's my issue. His inconsistencies, his defensive work rate, these are obviously the things I have my concerns about. It's easy to sit there and say that we have a great defensive coach and that could change that about a player. But when it's instilled in the player, and it has been for so long, it's very difficult to coach those types of things. We still have players, of course, as well, that ultimately don't necessarily apply their defensive work rate enough, even in this team with Arteta. And as a result, some of them have left now the club or are expected to leave the club as well. But if he was to sign for Arsenal, Leao, he was a player that Arsenal ended up going to get. I'd be excited by it because it's different, it's new, it's somebody that brings in something different to the team. And ultimately, I love being proven wrong if it turns out to be better for the betterment of Arsenal. But I lean slightly towards kind of Lookman over the two of them. I think Lookman's more efficient. I think Lookman's more consistent. I think Lookman's more dangerous. I just look at him as a player that, from what I've witnessed both of those two players over the last 2 to 3 seasons in Serie A, I just think that Lookman has the edge over Leao. That for me is where I see that. When you're looking at a player score a hat-trick in a European final, you're looking at the numbers that he's producing on a consistent basis in a worse team than Milan, of course, as well, at Atalanta. Not significantly worse, but in my view, over the last few years and whatever. So, Milan have won a title in these last few years. And some people would say, and probably fairly, that Leao had a massive, massive part to play in that league title. But I think that Lookman, for me, has that slight edge over the two players. But either of them, if they were to sign for Arsenal, I think would help. And that's the point, is that we need to bring in a player that's going to help. We need to bring in a player that's going to take us forward. And Leao is probably going to give us more than Martinelli will. Lookman is going to give us more than Martinelli probably will. So we need to find that player. And I think that boils down the conversation as well to just where we see ourselves come the end of the window. And that is, if Arsenal don't add that 7th player, if Arsenal don't add that 3rd attacking addition, we will rightly be disappointed. It doesn't erase the brilliant work that we've done in the window so far. What Arsenal have done so far in the window is great. We've signed 6 really good players that improve us in every single way from the positions that they've joined us in. Every single one of those 6 signings takes Arsenal forward, pushes the needle for the position they've come in to sign for. If we can add a 7th and a 3rd attacking player, then great. I think that's the thing that pushes us. Just would push us that little bit more that I can be confident about. That's for me is one of the more key elements to this window. And if we don't do that, it will be disappointing. Daba says, Martinelli doesn't need much to be unlocked his full potential, but whether he can do that with us or not, I don't know. Let's try and find some questions amongst this soup of ridiculous comedy that's going on at the moment. Dayu says, question, Tom, say we sign Eze and Arteta has all the players he wanted. How close can we get to the first place in the Premier League? You would say almost, it's not a case of how close can we get. The aim will be getting first place. Arsenal have been second for the last 3 seasons, as you very much well know. Some of those seasons we've been a lot closer than others. But Arsenal with Eze are, in my opinion, a more likely side to get first place than without Eze. And that's, I think, more of a reason than any other to bring a player into the club. And I sincerely hope that we do bring Eze in. But at the moment, it's just not looking likely. But things change and have changed already. You know, there's been like peaks and troughs of this Eze story. So hopefully we get to a peak again soon. Brendan says, TC, in my opinion, there is no way we're signing a left winger with Madueke and Martinelli. Do you think Gabby is Arteta's style and with the defensive work that he brings? If Trossard goes, Arsenal cannot afford not to go into the market. And I think Trossard is the key here. Trossard is the key factor for an attacking signing. It was thought that Eze might be separate, but it turns out Ethan Nwaneri's contract, of course, has been a lot more impactful on that than we initially had believed. But the Trossard future, I think, is without any question at all. The Leo Trossard is the linchpin of Arsenal's end of summer moves. Kian says Martinelli has lost confidence. He certainly needs to lift his head up more, but he needs far more support on the right side. Give Martinelli space and he can cause damage to the opposition. Boss says, I don't want my left winger to be great defensively. I want them to be great offensively. You want both. You know, you need both. You need them to do the work in both halves of the pitch. It's what's made Arsenal one of the best defensive teams in the world and given us a platform. I think people quickly forget what happens if you don't have defensive work rate. You end up like we did when we were playing under Emery, and we were playing at the start of Arteta's tenure, playing at the end of Arsene Wenger's tenure. Defensive errors beyond all measure. So I just never, ever, ever get on board with the people that say defensive work rate of wide players doesn't matter. It really, really does. Chris, who's been a member for 60 months with us now on the channel. That's 5 years of support. Thank you so much, Chris, for your kind and generous support to the channel. Always very valued member of our community here. 5 years. Incredible. Pretty sure that's right? 60 months. That's 5 years, correct? I'm sure. My maths. Target is 1,000 Martinellis every single day. Yeah, that's what we got to go for. So if we can get 1,000 alternatives to Martinelli before the end of the season. Let's go to Diuma says, Tom, how do you maintain your sanity after answering the same questions over and over every day? Hey, look, I've done it for years. So it's good. It's very, very, very good practice is what I'd say. Indubio says, Tom, looking back, would you prefer Eze, Barcola or Kvaratskhelia? I really like Kvaratskhelia. You know, I really, really think that he has that, just the ability to hit a ball exceptionally well. I think he's such a dangerous player. You know, PSG got an absolute steal. You know, they agreed that deal long before the January window opened. They did a lot of work into that deal before it happened. Kvaratskhelia, I think he's a great, great player. If I could choose between the three, I would choose Kvaratskhelia. Personally, I think he's beyond, like, he's top level. Kvaratskhelia. Is he the best left winger in the world? Name me a better one, is what I'd say. Name me a better left winger currently, right now, than Kvaratskhelia. It's better than Diaz for me. It's better than Rodrigo. It's better than Vinicius Jr. for me. I'm struggling. Not even Madueke, great. I think Mbappe's. You know, Mbappe plays centre forward. I just think that Kvaratskhelia is just better than Vinny Jr. for me. I think if you put Kvaratskhelia in that Real Madrid team, he delivers more than Vinicius Jr. So yeah, Rafinha has been very good, but again, I still think Kvaratskhelia is better. I just think that you know, he's taken with Dembele and Doué, you know, PSG to a Champions League victory now. He's taken them, you know, he joined in January and he's won himself 2 titles in the same season, you know, won the Serie A and Liga in the same campaign, and then a Champions League. Has any player ever done that before? If there's any player ever won 2 separate top 5 titles in the same league, won a winner's medal, for 2 top 5 leagues and a Champions League. Has that ever happened before? I don't know. But Kvaratskhelia for me is the best left winger in the world. What a player. What a player. And says, hi, Tom. I consider Rashford a Leao type player defensively, but watching Rashford in pre-season has made me believe that almost every player can change. The thing about Rashford is that he just needs an environment. Rashford needs the right environment to succeed. I think he's kind of fallen off the path a bit. I think he's the situation at Manchester United has had a really damaging effect on his personal life. And I think he's gone by the wayside a little bit, and he's kind of lost focus, and I think he's gone down some bad pathways as a result of that. And I think in the right environment, Marcus Rashford always had the potential to be a great player. And I hope that he can do that at us, because I can appreciate a lot of the work that Marcus Rashford has done off the field, but there are a lot of question marks about some of the behaviour issues off the field as well. So I think in the right environment, you can nurture a great player there. But yeah, with Barcelona, we will wait and see. Is that the right environment? I wouldn't say it's the best environment in the world, but it's produced some great players in those positions. Felix says, football is a complete team sport where every player contributes in defence and attack. Look at how PSG wingers such as Kvaratskhelia defend. Look at how their fullbacks attack. Martinelli's defending is important. Shawnito says, Tom, I don't blame us. I swear I can't watch this version of Martinelli for a third year. It's so frustrating. His decision-making really annoys me. That's one thing that you can never question Saka about. I think you're probably spot on. Rono says, Semenyo, he signed a new deal. He's going nowhere, mate. Kieran says, in fairness, his defence stats are partly because Milan keep their wingers away from the defensive responsibilities. Not saying he's great in that aspect, but he would defo improve. Salah's stats are even worse. Salah's kind of the exception to the rule, isn't he? He's the one player that Liverpool just allow to and that's why they're so vulnerable down the right. You know, why Trent was exposed so often. Salah has near zero defensive work rate. He's obviously now in his 30s, so it's less important. But I think the Liverpool's vulnerability comes about because of that lack of work rate defensively from Mohamed Salah. Daryl says, what about a cheeky bid for Benzema? Oh, just to bring it full circle, just to bring the Arsenal transfer conspiracy theories all the way back round. I'm going to scroll up the chat to see if I've missed any questions from earlier on in the show. Gary says, I'd be happy with a loan signing of a decent older player. I'm not scared by or scarred by the Sterling fiasco. I'd take Serge Gnabry. I think he just needs to rediscover his form, and he's still a very good player. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? A loan deal for Serge Gnabry. Eva says, I still think that we can get more from Martinelli, but we are past him being a starter at the club, in my opinion. Just scroll up a little bit more because I know I missed some questions before the end of part one. Is it because Leao is not asked to track back like Mo Salah isn't asked to track back regarding kind of that? I mean, potentially, but he's just always never done it. Lee says, who would you want to sign to make this a 10 out of 10 window? I mean, you'd have to sign Eze and a left winger to make it a 10 out of 10 window for me. Like, Eze makes it a 9 out of 10. But if you want to get the 10 out of 10, you need to get the sales and you need to get the left winger. Like a traditional left winger as well. So difficult to see that happening. Jackie says, Tom, given the wages both Havertz and Martinelli are on, given next year they will have 2 years left, do we renew or sell? What are your thoughts? Well, I mean, there's no reason not to renew. I don't think you need to improve Havertz's wage. He's on a very good wage. But there's no reason not to renew Havertz's deal. Martinelli, I think next year, this is a big year for Martinelli. If he does stay, and he looks like he is going to stay, I think there's an argument that next summer is the one where you try and sell him if he's had a decent season, but not necessarily proven himself to stay on at the club. Let's scroll to the bottom now and see if there's any new questions. Gaming says, why not bring Neymar in on loan for 6 months? Yeah, just to get injured straight away. Carl says, changing the subject, are we in a better position this season with sponsorship deals? Better sponsorship deals mean better players, surely. I mean, certainly Arsenal are working very hard on the commercial side of things. You know, they brought in Coca-Cola. There's suggestions that, you know, other drinks companies could potentially arrive. We've got the Guinness and the Asahi deals done this summer. I think there's others that I'm forgetting as well. Obviously, recently Shuba Realty became the training ground sponsor. So, yeah, there's a lot. there's a lot of improvements in the commercial sector with Arsenal, so that continues to improve things. And says, Tom, morning. As it standards, Arsenal is looking for a left winger and Eze. Trossard frees up that space on the left. As it stands, it would be unlikely for Arsenal to sign more than one more player. So if that ends up being Eze, I think that'll be it. If it ends up being a different player, I think that'll be it. I cannot see Arsenal signing two. It would be, they're struggling to get the funds for one more, let alone two. So sorry, mate. I don't think that's going to happen. Patrick says, what about a 4-4-2 with Havertz interchange between supporting striker and midfielder? It could be an epic and really occupied defenders for Saka and on the left. Saka on the right and the left then to flourish. I think it's something we could see this season, Havertz and Gyökeres playing together. Mr. J says, Tom, I read an article that you need 16 to 17 players who are tier 1 to win the title. Who would be your tier 1 players from the current squad? Tier 1 meaning trusted starting players. I mean, let's have a quick look at Liverpool's squad and see if we can say that there are 17 tier 1 players. Tier 1 players being, of course, title-winning potential players. Alisson, yes. Konate, yes. Van Dijk, yes. Kirkes, yes. Robertson, any more? Is he any more tier 1 player? I guess he's still in that bracket, so we'll say yes. Frimpong, yes. I wouldn't say Conor Bradley is yet. Gravenberch, yes. McAllister, yes. Is Curtis Jones? Is he a tier 1 player? Not sure. I'm not sure I'm there yet. Wirtz, yes. Szoboszlai, yes. I'd be inclined to say Harvey Elliott is. So that's what, 11. Gakpo, yes. Salah, yes. Ekitike, that's 14. So 14 players, and then we're kind of a little bit about maybe Curtis Jones, maybe Andrew Robertson. So, I mean, they don't have 16 or 17, what you describe as tier 1 players. So, does that work? I don't think so. I don't think that necessarily is the right way of putting it through. Do we have 17 tier 1 players right now? Looking at our squads. Raya, yes. Saliba, yes. Ben White, yes. Gabriel, yes. Timber, yes. Lewis Skelly, tier 1. Calafiori, tier 1. I think they're on the border. So I think they're two debatable ones. Odegaard, yes. Zubimendi, yes. Rice, yes. Saka, yes. Gyökeres, yes. I'd argue Trossard, to be honest, with his return, you could put him into that category more so than Martinelli. Player that's returned 17 goals, season before last, and I think got into well beyond double digits for goal contributions last season. You could put Trossard potentially into that bracket. If we're putting some other players that we've just discussed at Liverpool into that bracket, I think Trossard's got a shout. Havertz, for me, I know people will disagree, but he was on for 20 goals last season, Havertz. I'd put him in that bracket. And Madueke is a bit of a question mark. We don't know yet. Less than Liverpool, but there's a few more question marks, like Havertz, like Trossard, like Madueke, like Calafiori, like Lewis Skelly, like Mikel Merino. These players, I think, are question marks. So that's kind of the question that we're at, I think. I didn't forget McAllister and Gakpo. I definitely read their names out. I'm sure I did. Jay says, first 11 for United. Will it be Gyökeres or Havertz? Also excited to see the potential double pivot again. I think it can be huge for us this season. I think it will be Gyökeres now after starting the last 2 games. I'd be surprised if it wasn't him. If it is Havertz, all hell will break loose. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to wrap up today's show there. I hope you've appreciated the effort that's gone into it. A lot of interesting information around kind of the players that could be options for Arsenal. Who knows? Who knows if we'll see any of the players that we've talked about today join us before the end of the summer. There is only just over 2 weeks remaining in the window. We're less than 3 weeks now until deadline day, but we are more importantly just a few days away from the Premier League for Arsenal getting underway. Have an absolutely fantastic day. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.